What's up? It's boy Anthony. Lovecraft Country episode 9. Only one more to go. And it actually comes out later today after I upload this video. 10 episodes. That's an HBO season for you. But I guess I'm okay with it. I can use a little break from this from this perfect weekly upload thing. I mean, I'm gonna try to be as consistent as I can going forward, but it's been rough. So a synopsis. In this episode opens up with all of the cast surrounding Dee and her unconscious state. Her arm has been blackened by the curse from the last episode, and they're trying to figure out a way to restore her to normal. The best they can come up with is to ask Christina Braithwaite, but Christina Braithwaite agrees to only under the condition that Atticus surrender himself to her in Artem on the autumnal equinox. Now this is of course bad news because we of course learned that Atticus got a book from the future when he emerged from the portal, and what I think was the episode before this, and he discovered, in that book that's supposed to be a telling of his life and his family story, that Christina sacrifices him in order to cast a spell, presumably of immortality, which is kind of an issue I want to discuss after this, but yeah. So he basically has to agree to die. Christina can't even restore it perfectly to normal. The best she can do is reset the curse, so it takes a little longer before it kills her. Buys her more time. So she does that, and we see that she witnesses the death of the police chief from the last episode. Anyway, thankfully, my girl Hippolyta returns, and she, of course, is very much interested in restoring her daughter to full health. So she tells everybody about all the knowledge she acquired and mentions that she's capable of repairing the time machine. So what she thinks they should do is, retrieve the Book of Names from the past, since it was demolished in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they of course told her about everything that they've done as well, and well, she gets to work on it. She's able to repair the time machine. She's able to replace the key. She's able to narrow down what their universe and separate it from all the other parallel universes, and she sends her into the past, and she sends them into the past, particularly Montrose, Atticus, and Letitia. There for a brief moment, they go back to Tulsa. We get some beautiful shots of the town, showing how successful and prosperous it was. And then they witness some of the trauma from the past. They witness Atticus's father, Montrose, getting beaten, and it's kind of funny, and that's a bit of a problem, because this is clearly supposed to be a traumatic moment, and Montrose is being beaten because he's he's demonstrated an interest in feminine expression. He put like a corsage in his hair. His father saw that, and he started switching, beating him out in public. It was a little too black though. Like, it was so black it kind of became funny from like an observational humor kind of standpoint. Whether or not that was intended, it certainly wasn't appropriate. But when his father is beating him, he tells him to pick a switch, and he, when Montrose tries to block the switch with his hands, he yells, "Move your hand!" That's so black. That's so black. It's unintentionally funny, so it's not appropriate for the scene, but I appreciate the accuracy of everything nonetheless. Atticus begins to feel a bit sorry for Montrose, I guess, and understand some of his trauma. They then split up in search of the book, and I think Letitia seeks out Atticus's ancestor to retrieve the book. Meanwhile, Atticus has to track down Montrose because he disappears. Turns out Montrose was looking into trying to save a boy that he crushed on back as a kid, but Atticus stops him from doing so. He mentions that he'll refrain from saving the boy because he doesn't want to change the future. A careful instruction given to them by Hippolyta, who's clearly knowledgeable about this sort of thing, before they went through a portal and proceeded into the past. He mentions it'll just be a long line of sacrifices, the first of many sacrifices he'll make in order to become Atticus's father. This kind of hits him some type of way, since he recently swore off Montrose as his father because he looked like he was trying to get drunk just because he would returned to the past. But Montrose lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma during the bombing, and so it's very traumatic for him, and in many ways to come back to the past to see everything as it was, knowing what's going to happen. So Letitia bumps into some white guys that were attempting to attack the town. She runs from them and accidentally kind of like stumbles into Montrose's father, running away from these men. I guess she forgot that she was invulnerable, but I guess it also makes sense to run from them, since you don't want to make it, clear to them that there's, one can become invulnerable to bullets. I guess that would be changing the past. There, she informs all of them, Montrose's father as well as their family and neighbors, that, some white folks come in with guns and everything. She's worried about this initially, that it might change the past, but she's kind of pinned into a corner when they interrogate her and doesn't, have much of a choice. She starts, when they're distracted, arming themselves and putting themselves in positions to protect their home, she starts looking through the house in search for the Book of Names, but she gets spotted. She then has to, at threat of gunpoint, even though again it wouldn't have worked, I guess she's just being nice, she explains to Atticus's ancestor that it's a woman, the one that escaped her slave master in those dreams we saw over and over. She informs her that she needs access to the Book of Names to kind of set things right, to protect one of her ancestors' cousin, and to protect the child of one of her I said ancestors, descendants, cousins, and to protect the child of one of her descendants that she's currently carrying. And so she begrudgingly agrees to just burn to death and give Letitia the Book of Names. After it's also revealed that a big twist is that Montrose, when Montrose was saved from a bunch of murderous white folks from a black guy with a bat, he told this story to Atticus several times over. But it's revealed once they go back into the past that this guy never shows up until Atticus takes advantage of a bat he finds on the street to save Montrose and others from being harmed. So the twist is that the guy that saved Montrose's life was in fact his own son, Atticus. This seems to me like a grandfather paradox, because I don't know if Montrose or something like that. I'm not going to pretend like I know all the technical terms, but the point is, if Montrose's son was required to protect his life so that he can give birth to his son, that's not a logical sequence of events. That doesn't make any sense. I get that they're going for some kind of time loop. I don't know, maybe time moved in a linear fashion until it was deviated in some way, shape, or form. But I don't know if that even works. But yeah, it's fun, but I don't know if it makes any sense. Anyway, Letitia gets the book. Atticus saves the childhood form of his father. And they all manage to escape Tulsa before they're killed and return to the future with the Book of Names. Hippolyta is on the verge of death, but maybe they can save Dee. At least that's what would be implied. I think that's about it. I don't think there was anything else. That's my briefest synopsis, but they mostly just kind of stood around having conversations and watching things happen to other people. But it was good. So I liked it. There was a lot of action. I like time travel. Hippolyta has retained all the knowledge she got from before. We're getting to see her use that, so that's great. Let's talk about some of the characters. So, Atticus. Yeah, I mentioned the time loop thing. That didn't really make all that much sense. I guess the biggest thing that bothers me is... Not that it bothers me all that much. I'm just kind of tired of him and his drama with his dad going back and forth. He's had more than enough reason to cut his dad off from all the abuse, not to mention he murdered an innocent woman, which they're able to let go surprisingly easy. So yeah, I mean, I get that he's, inherited trauma, intergenerational trauma again is a very strong theme of the show. So it's not entirely his fault that he's a mess, but still, for the sake of his own psychological health, I'm for Atticus cutting him off. But they don't need to have this going back and forth stuff. But I guess they're still on good terms because, because Atticus gained a more thorough understanding as to why Montrose is the person he is and how dedicated he was to the idea of being a good father to Atticus in theory, if not in actual practice. Montrose, again, his actor was spectacular. We got to understand why he is the type of person he is. It was nice to see the sort of intergenerational trauma that gets passed down in LGBT communities. It was difficult to have to watch himself cut him off from a boy he had a crush on in the past. I think I skipped over that synopsis, but before his boy crush got killed, he was gonna break up with him because he didn't want to be seen as gay or be receive the discrimination that came with that. And so he always regretted treating his boyfriend this way before he was killed. And I think the way in which the LGBT community is kind of driven apart and forced to be antagonistic to each other for the sake of protecting themselves is something that's worth exploring, and I think was explored well in this episode. It was kind of weird that he started drinking so quickly when they were there to save Dee, but at the same time, I don't know, if you've gone back in time through a portal to Tulsa, Oklahoma right before it's gonna be bombed and you see your childhood self. If that's not a time to drink, what is, Letitia. I don't know, I didn't like Letitia's part all that much. If only because it was mostly just about watching Atticus's family die and her asking them to do it, and them just passively accepting it. Roasting, well, one of them anyway, intentionally roasting in silence in a fire, which is...
Current warning ahead.
I hate to complain about realism in a story that has time travel and magic in it, but sometimes I think the show is a little too obsessed with using metaphors and magic and superhuman behavior in order to try to capture the emotions and depth of a lot of these characters. I think in an attempt to make them more human, but it actually just kind of makes it silly and harder to relate to. I get that Atticus's female ancestor, whatever her name was, I forget. I said it, but yeah, it would have been nice if it was something less silly than her just choosing to roast to death. I guess that poem that played when she was roasting was kind of nice. It's weird how in this show there are a lot of spoken word poems and things of that nature that play over times of violence and conflict where you kind of are more interested in the action that's going on than the poetry itself. But I guess there's that's a poetic statement in and of itself that they would sort of bury the violence beneath these spoken word poems. I don't recognize them, with the exception of maybe one. But they're nice. Very well crafted. Let's see. Hippolyta. Hippolyta wasn't in most of the episode, but she was very impactful in the few lines she had and the few roles she had in the episode. Again, she's my hero. Hippolyta's the best character. I'm way more interested in this kind of science mini world stuff than I am the spell stuff, but I have to admit the spell stuff is getting a lot better. It's nice to watch, I don't know, Letitia be invulnerable. It'll be nice to see Atticus's monster again, I guess. Yada yada yada. She looked like she was near dead at the end of the episode, which I hope is not the case, because again, she's the most fun character, and I want to see how she can influence other black folk, at the time with her knowledge, if she'd be willing to help them, and if so, to what degree she can do it. She looked like she was at death's door, so she could die. I don't think she will, but I don't have any concrete evidence to think that, so let's hope that doesn't happen. Ruby seems to have formally allied herself with Christina Braithwaite. She's obviously very thankful for the magical opportunities she's presented her, and for the opportunities and for the times in which she made an effort to protect Atticus. At least that's what appears to be the case. She could be lying in wait, for an opportunity to disrupt whatever ritual Christina is looking to perform in order to gain immortality.
Current warning ahead.
But I can certainly understand why Ruby would like her. I mean, she's been more useful than she's been harmful at this point, I suppose. That's also something I didn't bring up in the synopsis as much, but yeah, that's what Ruby's up to. Christina, the one thing that's kind of confusing me is, as far as I know, the whole reason she wanted Titus Braithwaite's missing pages, as well as the key to Hiram's time machine, was so she could gain immortality. And yet, she's gotten access to those things, and she's cast new spells, and yet it's still not clear what immortality is, I guess, because at this point, we've seen potentially 4 different versions of immortality. We've seen the typical version of immortality that we might think of, which is like all the bullets and stuff bouncing off of Letitia. So, and Christina gave her that. So if she can give other people that spell, why can't she cast it on herself? I guess maybe she has. But Letitia can't seem to be harmed at all. maybe the exception is that she still ages or something. But I don't know. That seemed like immortality in a way. And then you have Atticus, where he was going to be shot to death until a monster popped up and out of the ground and blocked the bullets as they were going to shoot him or reach him just in time. And then he killed off everyone that would attempt. The monster killed off everyone that would attempt to hurt Atticus. So that seemed like a form of invulnerability, and that was supposed to be an invulnerability spell. Maybe that's not what they actually cast, but I think that's what it was. They called it. That's what the attempt was. Then we saw Christina Braithwaite die like Emmett Till, and she seemed visibly injured, unlike Letitia, and even dead, and even maybe seemed to die. But then she recovered and kind of sprang back to life like it was nothing. So I guess even that doesn't count as immortality. So being immune to bullets and fire isn't immortality. Having monsters pop up and save you every time it's convenient to do so isn't immortality. Dying and springing back to life isn't immortality. What is she trying to achieve? Does she have like a distinct idea of immortality that we can't comprehend? Or I mean, I don't know. It's confusing. But yeah, Dee didn't get to do much. She's still unconscious. She was restored to her normal self temporarily until they can get that book back, which they succeeded in doing. I thought it was kind of hilarious that she also turned into one of those monsters, those dancing girl, Uncle Tom's Cabin monsters that were chasing her around. This is a weirdly, kind of like poorly paced curse, I thought. Like, so first the curse chases you around and you can actually outrun it until you submit yourself to it. So it'll catch you because it's tireless and you aren't. But you can't outrun it. And then once it gets you, it doesn't even kill you. Then it turns you into what was chasing you, and then it kills you. That seems a little contrived. Not as contrived as turning your daughter into a foxtail demon to murder her abusive father figure rather than just divorcing him, but pretty contrived. So yeah, I think that was everything. I think we've covered, like all the story beats and stuff, and all of the characters' motivations and the way in which they've evolved. I'm sure there's a little, but I don't want to ramble. That's kind of good enough. What's going to happen going forward? Well, I think they're going to restore Dee to normal. I suspect Hippolyta is still alive. I can't imagine Atticus dies, because one, he's the main character. Two, he maybe has a form of invulnerability since he has that monster. And they all went out of their way not to bring up how the police chief was killed when Christina asked how he was killed. So Christina doesn't know which spell he cast. And we also learned in an earlier episode that the reason her father, Samuel Braithwaite, was killed was because even though he was invulnerable, he deactivated his spell in order to cast a new one on Atticus. To return to the Garden of Eden. That episode feels so long ago. But, yeah, so if that's the case, then she might have to, in whatever spell she has, in order to cast a spell, her new immortality spell, or seemingly incredibly redundant immortality spell, on Atticus. So there may be a time coming up in the next episode in which she is vulnerable to being killed. Ruby's always kind of had her doubts about her. Letitia's invulnerable. Ruby might be able to find an opening when Christina's trying to cast the spell on Atticus. Atticus also might have more insight as to what she's going to do himself because he read the book. I mean, the odds really don't seem in Christina's favor that everything's going to go the way she, thinks it would. And Atticus agreed to, allow her to sacrifice him more or less, but why would he uphold that agreement?
Speed limit reduced ahead.
Is he just an honorable guy? I don't know. It seems kind of silly. So, we'll see what happens.
Speed warning.
Jeez. Speed limit keeps going. We'll see what happens. But, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen going forward. The next episode is the last episode of the season, so I think the bigger question is, do we get another season? And my hope is that we will, and I imagine we will, because this show has been the talk of the black community for a while. And a lot of us have gotten, what we wanted to see out of the imagery. Black folks doing weird stuff with horror and futuristic science and magics and spell and stuff. And they've already laid the groundwork for a lot of fun stuff that can happen in the future. So, yeah, we could get, another Wakanda with magic and or futuristic science. They could double cross Christina. Maybe she tries to get revenge. They could. Well, yeah, I guess those are the only avenues. Those are the only ideas I can see going forward. That either it becomes like this back and forth war between them and Christina Braithwaite because they double cross her, or they form like a Wakanda and try to train the black folks to go up against, all the white folks of the day. Which could be interesting because there are still plenty of people from the Order of the Ancient Dawn. They had 34 lodges. There are still plenty of enemies out there with all sorts of new spells. They can have all sorts of new encounters with different enemies from those lodges. So there could be a back and forth war between them. And of course, there could be a little of both. But I guess the enemy is probably more so the lodge than like all white people, even though everybody's racist. But I'd like to see the Wakanda fan. But yeah, I'm rambling. At this point, I thought this was a really good episode. I'm looking forward to the next episode, and of course, your boy will cover it, and we'll be done. Now, if this show does get a second episode, can I guarantee I'm gonna cover it? No. We'll see. Maybe if I got my channel's a little bigger, if people develop retroactively an interest in this series of videos, which I doubt will be the case, then yeah, but we'll see. But I definitely won't stop uploading videos, so I'm gonna move on and try to do some things that are more ambitious. Look forward to it. Peace.